Mo,
Hey, Ricky.
the doctor
Guess,
is in.
guess what? The doctor is in. We're blessed to be back here another Wednesday, another chance to talk about the things that matter and bring it to people's homes and really get into some good stuff this week. You know, we don't have that many male guests.
I
And
know.
when
I
we
told him that. I told him that.
it's true, and it's our privilege and our honor to host Dr. Is it Dr. Vidal or Dr. Vidal?
That's correct,
I
Vidal.
love
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Vidal, because you know the percentage of Black clinicians, Black oncologists in this country, whether surgical, medical, radiation oncologists, is less than 2%, and the representation matters. It matters from the bedside to the bench to the classroom, and we got some major representation here
We
today.
do.
How you doing, Doc?
We do. I picked him up.
Well, okay, that sounds exciting. Tell us more. How'd you pick up
Not
this,
really.
this
Not really,
amazing,
no.
amazing doctor?
No, so he was actually our first episode on our road show was in Memphis. And I spoke on a panel with him, and we really didn't even talk to each other before the panel. Shanta Chambers kind of threw us together, who I love Shanta. She's one of our besties. And we just sort of talked on this panel, and I have learned about all the amazing things he's doing in clinical trials in Memphis. He's not seeing the numbers that we're seeing all the rest of the world. So I said, you got to come on our show. And then we bumped into each other at ASCO. He's like, don't I know you? so we're here.
Well,
and
thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to be outnumbered by two awesome docs. So y'all go, because I don't know anything. This is above my pay grade.
Well, why don't you just start by telling us where you're from? Tell us your why. Tell us how you got into this field and what keeps you showing up to work every day. Let's start there.
Do we have time for all of that?
Yeah.
So you'll notice I have an accent. So I grew up and was born in the Caribbean island of Dominica, and I came up to the US to study undergrad. And in my junior year, my mom actually succumbed to leukemia.
Wow.
And so
Young.
that sort of, I wanted to be a cardiologist of all things. And then, I sort of moved into the research realm, trying to have a better understanding of what was going on. So I did a master's after undergrad, and then went into an MD PhD, then found myself on the West Coast at Stanford for the rest of my training, and moved to Memphis once I grew up. And so I've been there since 2014. I currently am a breast oncologist. I focus only in breast for about 60% of my time, 40% spent with research. I currently am the director of clinical research at West. Some of my focus is on disparities and also trying to increase minority awareness and recruitment to clinical trials. And we've done a very good job at West, if I may tap my shoulder a little bit more, but want to sort of spread that towards the country as a whole, because of the importance of getting minority representation and study. So that's my professional. So I am involved in a lot of sort of pharmaceutical steering committees of trials. We do very good at recruiting trials. And so I met this young lady at a live event in Memphis that we've been doing for the last, 6-7 years?
Yeah, it's called Memphis Live. It's called
Memphis Live. Yeah, I've been involved in that every year since then. And it is a program that really educates the community, not only patients, but their family members about oncology as a whole, breast cancer as a whole, and then we sprinkle in some research in there. And so we met Ricky, and one thing led to another, and I'm here now. So that's it.
That, as we know, is the short version. I mean, I think it'd be a different show for you to tell us all of the challenges, obstacles, and things that you went through to get to where you are. And we should talk about those things sometime too, as even barriers, and for folks to understand what is so important about this representation. But when you say you focus on, on disparities and you focus on increasing representation in trials, what do you think people don't understand? The average woman who's diagnosed with breast cancer, what do you think she thinks about a trial? And what are maybe some of the major misconceptions there?
Yeah, so that's such an important question, because I get that all the time. I try to offer all patients the trial if they qualify for it, and I get the guinea pig, thrown back at me many times, and then just sit down and have a conversation. But most important is that breast cancer, is very common in patients of color, and those patients use all of the drugs that are available to treat. The issue is we don't really understand very well how those drugs, one, how efficacious they are in your population, two, what's the tolerability? Because guess what? We didn't participate in the studies.
Hello.
So the results that we see is really pertains to a Caucasian population. Mm-hmm. But you still use the drug. And so I tell patients and family members all the time that, and we're just talking about oncology, it's across the board. It's in diabetes, it's in hypertension, it's in heart disease. Mm-hmm. We just don't participate in trials, but guess who uses the drug most of all? It's our population.
Right.
So
and we're dying. We're dying
at such a high rate.
Right.
So it's really, 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 really important that we participate so we get a better understanding of at least how efficacious the drug is in your population.
What do you say to this? I talked to a surgeon earlier this week, and she said, well, when you cut into somebody, a breast is a breast is a breast is a breast. Right? What do you say to the tone deaf person who thinks like this? How do you help them to understand that this could be a different disease and a different molecular process? Is it? Do you think that it is? Do you think it isn't? Or you think we just don't know?
It definitely is. So just basic triple negative breast cancer. It is more common in a patient of color than it is in a Caucasian patient.
3 times.
All right?
3 times.
3 times more common.
I had it. I don't know why. I don't have BRCA. I don't know why.
Right. And when you exclude all other confounding, other confounders, it's still higher in that population. It's biology. All right. There is something about our biology that puts us at risk for this type of cancer. So if breast is not a breast, it's not a breast. All right. There's something inherent about our tissue that puts us at risk for these types of cancers. I also did some work with a very smart Black researcher at UT, just looking at the makeup of microbes in and within the tissue of the gut and the breast, and how is that different from a patient of color versus a Caucasian patient, and how that impacts your diagnosis and your risk for breast cancer. It's different.
I gotta pause you there because people don't understand.
Say that again.
Term, the gut microbiome. What do you mean? Our intestines are different? The bacteria? What's happening here?
So all of our gut is filled with microbes that perform some form of function for us. The good ones do, they're bad ones. But the type of microbiome, the makeup of your gut, of your body, does things or impact your health. And it's different. It's different by geography, it's different by race. And so understanding that is absolutely important. So it's not a one shirt fits all.
Is that measurable? Is that something that we can measure?
Yes, but you have to take samples. It is still in the research realm and has not, doesn't impact clinically what we do, but we're getting more and more understanding about what that is.
I have a question. So for all the drugs that have been developed for which we're now using on Black and brown women, right, that weren't tested in us, how do we assess what's happening in our population, right? We can't go back and repeat those trials, but how does it look moving forward for us to get that information? What kind of trials are those? And are we doing those trials?
So I will say since COVID, there has been a bigger focus on trials in minority patients, recruiting trials, recruiting patients of color, so we have that better understanding. Even at the NIH, every drug that's now coming through the NIH is now saying, how many patients of color and what are you doing to recruit those patients so that they can be represented? And now we have pharmaceutical companies also now have to pay attention, and they're coming to me, they're coming to you, Ricky and Mo, trying to help sort of recruit that population, because it's absolutely important. For the drugs that are already on the market, we probably have to do more phase 4 research, just after market research, sort of understanding how patients of color are doing from a response perspective, but also from a tolerability perspective. We know women of color or people of color, for example, tend to run lower on our white counts, all right? So we tend to be more neutropenic for those drugs, which means we tend to have more dose delays, more dose reductions, more intolerability for a lot of drugs, which then impacts the efficacy of the drug. So all of that we need to understand. And I know there are some companies who are at least developing trials looking forward. I know one company actually that I know, Ricky, you mentioned and you work with, was developing a trial specifically in patients of color, looking at one drug that was approved in triple negative breast cancer. We're talking about Genentech and atezolizumab, Tecentriq. And they were trying to design a trial that was just meant to recruit a high population of patients of color, just so that we can understand. The problem with that is patients of color are usually very sensitive towards, you want to do a trial in me only?
Like, what's wrong with that drug? What's wrong with that drug?
What drug is it? What is your intention? So it was something that we talked about a lot. But the thing about it is that drug was already approved. Patients were already using it. We were just trying to collect a group of patients. Unfortunately, the drug was pulled by the FDA, so that trial never went forward. But that is the sort of things that are happening behind the scene to try to have a better understanding of how folks of color do on with drugs.
Let me ask you this thing, because I just heard you say we need to try drugs on populations of color. We need to understand better the biology. And then a company did just that and said, we got a drug, we want to test it and see how it works in Black people. And nobody wanted to be in the trial, right? What's up with that, Ricky? You gotta start. You gotta explain that, because that sounds schizophrenic to the white researcher who's like, but I did just what you asked me to do.
Right. And I was a part of those conversations with breasties for Tecentriq, a couple of years ago. But it's almost like you have to show them, and where Dr. Vidal started, you have to show them that these drugs that we have were not made for us. They're not made for us, and we're dying. And if you look at the statistics and say that we have a 41% higher mortality rate and a 39% higher recurrence rate, and we get TNBC at 3 times the rate, if you show them the numbers and the data and the horribleness of the state of Black breast cancer, and say you have a different disease, we know that your cells are different, and these drugs are not working for you, girlfriend. So you got to do this drug, and we're testing this drug because we think it's going to work on your Black body. And I think the other argument that I use a lot is, if you just go on a chemo regimen, the doctor comes in, they give you your port, they squirt the juice in, and then you come back the next week or the next week and the next week, but you don't get a scan for 3 months, right? So 3 months has now gone by. You don't know what's going on in this tumor, right? You have no idea what's going on in this tumor. You hope it's shrinking. You're feeling it, trying to feel well. I had mine cut off before I'd had chemo. So but you're feeling it, trying to, did it go down, whatever, but you don't know. But in a trial, they're all over you, right? You get more scans, you get more blood work, you get more supervision, you have more people to ask questions of, you're more around the doctors, you get to know them better, you have a great nurse navigator working with you, you get better care. And so that was my way in to say, you're going to get better care. And guess what? If that drug isn't working for you, you're going to know it a lot sooner. Or if it is working, you're going to know it a lot sooner. But if it's not, we can fix it. We can take you off of it. We can put you on something else, right? And so that's the best situation to be. And when I'm talking to my TNBC sisters, I love everybody. I love all of my Black breasties. But my TNBC sisters are, that's where I came from. And for me right now, if you're under 40 and you have TNBC any stage, the best treatment you can get is a clinical trial. Like right now, that's the best, you're buying the best science you can buy for your body.
What do you say about that, Doc? Do you corroborate that? You think that should be the messaging? And I agree with you, Ricky. I just kind of want to see what the difference is in what we're telling women. Is a trial sort of optional, or is it now really more of the standard of care?
It is very much a standard of care because, again, the way the trials are designed and being offered right now. So I write trials too. So very rarely are you going to get a trial where the control is an inferior regimen. 99.999% of the time, the control is standard of care.
Okay, say that again like I'm a 5-year-old so everybody can get what you just said.
All right. So most trials, in order to get a drug approved, it needs to be compared to what we currently do, what we do on a day-to-day basis outside of a trial. So the trials, when they design, the non-treatment arm is usually what you're gonna get if you didn't participate in the trial. And the treatment arm is generally what you're going to get plus. So if you got to the control arm, you're not getting anything inferior. You are getting what you would have gotten outside of a trial. But the benefit is you have a 50% chance of getting that additional drug. But more than anything else, with your besties in triple negative, you're paying it forward. I always tell my patients, the reason I can tell you with some level of certainty that this drug is you're likely to do well with this drug, that this drug is superior, is because women like yourself participated in trials years before, so we could better understand it. And so I think at least it's a good thing that you're paying it forward, but it's not gonna hurt you to pay it forward.
Right, and do it for your daughter. Do it for your daughter.
Do it for your daughter, for your friends, for your family members.
Right.
Yeah.
But the point that it's not costing you now to do this trial, right? You're not doing it at the expense of your life. You're not doing it at the expense of your survival is a really key point, because people in the now want to live, right? They don't.
Right.
And so I think that it's really a key point you made. Now, I've got a statistic that says that 48% of Black women are less likely to receive the standard of care, the guidelines for triple negative breast cancer. We're less likely to complete a regimen, a chemotherapy regimen, once we've been offered it. What's up with that? Is it confounding? Like, what's the reason why we don't get offered the standard, and why we're not as likely to finish chemo? Is our biology different? Is it,
that is so loaded because there is so many different reasons. So there's a racial and prejudicial component to that question. There is part of it is one, the racial. And in medicine, so for example, pain. It's been thought that somehow Black folks don't have the same pain threshold as folks of white folks. Which is
painful. They teach that. They used to teach it in the surgical literature that we had different pain receptors and our skin was thicker. And
and so there are prejudice associated with that. And then the other thing about it is, a lot of our population, especially in the city, low socioeconomy, that are not as educated, it takes a little bit more time to go through the process with that patient so that they understand what you're doing. And many physicians just don't have it and don't want to take the time. So
Right.
instead of me sitting down and telling you, this is the best drug for you because of A, B, and C, and say, well, no, you're thinking about it that way, but you should be thinking about it that way. They're like, no, let me just give you something else and move on. So there's that question is there's so many different components to that question, but a big part of it is prejudice in the system.
Yeah.
A big part of it is low socioeconomy. So those patients either don't have insurance, and so the expensive drugs are not being offered. The expensive, costly treatments are not being offered. And then when you put it in where those patients get treatment. So a lot of those patients don't get treated at the best, well-known, best reputed institutions. And that's why in Memphis at West Clinic, we, very early made the decision that we were not going to do pocket biopsies. All right. You come through our door, you get treated, and you get the same treatment as any other patient who comes through the door.
Say that again. You're not going to do pocket biopsies. I love it.
We don't do
What's
pocket
that
biopsies.
mean?
It means that the finance doesn't dictate what treatment you get.
How is that possible?
Because we try our darndest. We are an institution, and every institution we're a business, you have to make money. But there are cute little ways of designing your business such that you can treat everybody. So for one thing, you can almost always get a pharmaceutical company to give you free drug for a patient, regardless of what it is, if they're under or uninsured. So we have a specific department whose sole focus on trying to get those for patients. Things like CT scans, that's internally ours. We decide we're going to eat that, and we have a certain amount of budget for it. But more than anything else, you know what we did? We had one of our satellite clinics that sat in the middle of Memphis, where most of our minority patients are treated. What we did is we collaborated with the county hospital, and we said, we're going to make that clinic your cancer center. But everything that functions in there and managed in there is West Clinic. We do everything, nothing's changed from the internal working, but you do the finances, the billing, all of essentially it's yours. So what that allowed is for us to be able to treat that population, give them the high level of care, but not as focused on their finances. So there are little cutesy little ways you can do those things, but you have to be focused as an institution on those in order to make those things work.
Yeah, in our system, we have a financial navigator, right? And her job is to help patients navigate the finances of cancer, and there's certain, special training for that. But I think you're absolutely right that there are so many barriers. Why is this all so difficult? And what do we do to help patients navigate this process smoother? What have you seen that works?
So, patients meeting patients where they are, patients who come through the door, making sure that a lot of the people they interact with look like them. And that's very important because
that's
then
so important.
That breaks down that barrier so you can have a more open conversation about what's going on with you. There are lots of patients who come to see me who have a lot of things going on at home that's going to impact their care. The fact that they have family to take care of, they have all of these comorbidities or the family members, and a lot of them don't want to talk about it. But if there's somebody they feel like is familiar that can resonate with them, then they're more open, and then we have a better understanding of what's going on, so we can better able to treat them and also keep them on therapy. So there's lots that goes on, but the institution just has to understand that needs to be a focus. You can't just say every patient coming through the door is equivalent, because they are not. And there are white patients too who have that very same thing, And you have to understand that population also in order to give them the good care.
Mo, it kind of goes with what you had, how Juliet describes going to the doctor. One of our patients, she's metastatic, 45, brain mets, lung mets, like mets everywhere. God bless her. But she says when she goes to the doctor, I said, I don't want to have McDonald's drive-through appointment. I want the Ruth Chris steak dinner appointment today, doc. I want the appetizer, the drink, the cocktail, the salad,
Right.
all the courses and the dessert. And that's what you're doing. And Mo and I talk all the time about what health equity is. It's practicing the golden rule, treating people how you want to be treated, treating how they deserve to be treated. And that's what you're doing. You're treating them like people. You're giving them the treatment and the care that's well beyond just the medical care. It's all the care. You're caring for the whole person. And that's so important. And we just are not getting that in other places. I mean, it's a special place that you have, because the stories we hear, Doc, are like, I'm sure you hear them too.
Very, very different.
Think about
Yeah.
it. Frightening. So thank you for what you're doing, because it's making a difference.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of other physicians who are dedicated to that too, even at our institution. So thank you, and I'm taking that thank you for every one of those physicians. I'm including Dr. Gary over here. But I will,
Yeah. She's my heart. So
yeah, but I will tell you, I personally, my mom succumbed to her disease much faster than she would because she lacked insurance.
Same.
All right. And that is very, 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 very personal to me. And so I don't ever want a patient walking through my door who I will sit back when I close my eyes and think that patient had a worse outcome because I didn't do what I should have done for them. I never, ever, I'm retiring when that happens.
Yeah.
All right. So that has been my motto and my focus.
We got a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ricky.
I said, that's not gonna be anytime soon. You're not retiring anytime soon.
No, but it does keep you up at night. It definitely does. Your mind is you're racking your brain trying to think of what else you can do and how else you can help, and what do people need and what services can you provide. We have a question from the Facebook group, but that's asking about a way to find out if you're taking a certain medication. Is there a way to find out the data for Black women? So if you're on tamoxifen, is there somewhere you can go? Is there a central place you can look to find out how many Black women were in the trial or what the data is for you specifically? And I don't know if that sort of service exists, but is there a site that people could go to?
No, not one where it's in a format that's easily searchable. You would have to, even if I wanted to go look up that information, I would have to go to PubMed and then look and search articles to be able to pull that up. There are some sites, there are some minority advocacy groups that have tried to put those things together, and I don't like to send people to Google because with every good information, there's 10 bad. But those agencies can have some information, but there really isn't a site where this is collated in a format that's that's mineable.
Right. I know, when I started digging into the trials for like the old drugs, adriamycin, Cytoxan, Taxol, and from the 70s, like from the 70s and 80s, Dr. Sarah actually helped me, Mo. She gave me access to some FDA data that she had. So we went together, and I was way from my pay grade, but we were able to see that there wasn't even racial data accumulated in those days.
Yeah, you were not collecting race, no.
They weren't collecting anything. So you didn't even know, even age, like basic things that we take for granted in science now were not happening. But it was obvious that there was no Black representation. And even now, as you said, Dr. Gregory, that we should be tracking real world data. So for drugs like Keytruda and Trodelvy that are kind of making inroads, and all the immunotherapy stuff, we should be looking at how they're performing in Black bodies.
What does that mean, Doc? What is real world data?
Real world, so clinical trials are very sterile, meaning they're very controlled. Your patient has to be, it can only be of a certain type and quality in order to get on the study, and they have to follow this very tight regimen. It's important because you want the data at the end of the day to be very interpretable, and you don't want other factors to mess up your results. All right.
And
So
conformity, yeah.
right. And so clinical trials are very sterile. Real world is looking in the clinic, once the drug is approved, who's actually getting the drug and how they're doing. So for example, a good example is a patient, we always talk about performance status. This is really a measure of how the patient is doing. So a patient who is sitting so tired that they're in bed more than 50% of the time, we consider that patient to have a performance status of 2. Clinical trial wants a performance status of 0 and 1. All right. However, if that patient comes to me, that drug is approved, and I have a patient who tells me I'm so tired every day, I have to spend 50% I'm sitting, 50% I'm standing, and they have a disease where that drug is approved, I will likely give them the drug to see how they would do. All right. So, but that patient wouldn't be on a trial, so we don't quite know how that drug. So real world is really just looking at what the outcome of the drugs and the trial, the drugs, not only from an efficacy perspective, but from a tolerability perspective, how it's behaving as compared to the sterile environment of a trial.
And are there some tools to measure that real world data? How do you collect that information and analyze it?
Yeah, so that is a whole headache on its own. So because when I say confounders, there are lots of other factors that can influence or impact your results. So whereas in clinical trial, you're controlling for all of those factors, in real world, they're all exposed. And so you have to, a lot of the real world data, so I do a lot of real world data by looking into our electronic medical record system. Say I have a question to ask, I'm going to look for one population versus the other population, and then try to remove or make the populations as similar to each other as possible. Because remember, it's not controlled, so it's hard to get all of the patients looking alike, and then looking forward and see how they participate, how they did. So that's sort of how we do real world. So essentially we're looking, I said looking forward, but we're looking back, which is what we call retrospective. We're looking back at how those patients did. So we know their outcome, and we're just looking back to say that population versus that population, they've already gotten the drug. What was the outcome for that population? Rather than most clinical trial, which is what we call prospective, we give them the drug and then we follow them in the future to see how they do. Most real world we're looking back to see the population, what happened to them.
And it's sort of self-reported too, but you know what? It's data that we wouldn't have had.
It's very important data.
Right. It's data. It's showing that it's working or not. So, for
real world, we have one drug, which is palbociclib, which is the Pfizer drug.
Right.
That got an FDA approval for men, solely based on real world retrospective data, because it is such a small population that we really couldn't design a trial prospectively. So what happened was the company went back and collected data on men who did the drug and then saw the outcome, and based on that, the FDA gave them an approval.
But that's great. That's great, because it was just another way of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Gregory, we've been doing this when we trial thing since I met you in May, right? And we've been all over the country, but so far we've signed up 3,716 Black women for trial portals, which, you know what, I'm proud of that number, but because it would have been 0 if we hadn't, but we have a long way to go to get that 3% number. So how can we basically get more support and alliances around what we're doing because it's working? And so many institutions, and you're working with a lot of the same pharma companies that we're working with, and they're open-minded and saying, how can we incorporate this? But we really need to make it across the board, like, because to me, nobody's getting it yet. So we have a formula. I don't know why it's working, it's God, but I think it's because it's for breasties, by breasties, about breasties, with breasties as the voice of trust. But I feel like if we could scale it more and get more hospitals using some of the tools that we've developed and just trial centers, that we could make bigger numbers.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's finance and understanding that this is important. And if you think this is important, you'll put the money behind it. Because it's not cheap. It's going to take some cost to then go broadly and do the things that you're doing, so that we could recruit the patients to at least understand. And the most important thing about what you're talking about is you're getting patients of color at least looking into trials. Like,
Right.
your mind is open. That's the first step.
Right.
All right, they're interested. And whether or not they get on a trial or not, they may not get on this trial now, but they may get one in the future because they're now thinking trial is an option.
And
but
they're asking their doctors for them, and they're saying, wait a minute, what do you have for me?
Do you have trial options? What about this? I've heard about this trial. Am I a candidate? And I can tell my family members. But on a big picture, one, I think I don't want to downplay this. In the last year or 2 years, the level of visibility on the disparities in health based on race is bigger than I've ever seen in my career. All right, the fact that it is a conversation that's been had and it's been having it's just bigger. My fear is that it's a fad, that it is the sexy thing now. Everybody's doing it, and 2 years from now, be back to what we were doing before.
Exactly right.
So whenever I get asked to participate or give advice, I always say, whatever we do needs to be something that lives on and continues.
Right.
All right.
But let's ask that question though, the corollary question. What do you think it takes to make it sustainable?
Yeah. What do you think it takes?
That's, man, if I had the full answer, I would be a wealthy and very famous person. I think it takes dedication, first of all. You need a team that's fully focused, not only an individual, but from a nationalistic perspective. You need an organization that is broad across the board, so that you can touch different people, not just in Memphis, but many different areas. You need money and financing. You need dedication, not only from the pharmaceutical company, but from the government. The NIH that makes decision about whether or not a drug is approved, whether or not you can do a trial, needs to have the understanding that you, pharma, if you want to do a trial, knowing how your drug does in a patient of color versus not is important. So you tell them your drug can never be approved unless you have enough of those patients. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to find those patients, And so it has to be, but more than anything else too is clinical trial can be costly for patients and institutions. Clinical trials is designed such that what is generally standard of care, what your doctor would do for you outside of a trial, is covered by your insurance. The things that are covered by the trial are usually the extra stuff.
Right,
So in order
transportation or whatever.
so,
Right.
or the drug that we're giving you, that we're studying, if the trial is asking to do a CT scan every week instead of standard of care, which is every 2 weeks, then the trial has to cover that. So in order for you to get on a trial, you need to have insurance. All right? Because a lot of the cost of the trial is covered by standard of care insurance. And if patients don't have those, especially patients of color who are more likely to not have it, then they can't participate on study. And so having a more broad, I think, national insurance is absolutely important. Yep.
I love that. I think I love going back to the idea of tracking real world data. I think I read an article that said you were working and partnering with an app to really be able to track that for patients. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what successes you've had and why something like that is important?
Yeah, so utilizing technology in that fight, we all have cell phones. Most of us have cellular access. Most of us have an idea of how to use an app and what we do with an app. And so utilizing technology to gather that data. So one of the studies that we got funded through the NIH was to utilize a mobile app in order to gather data from patients about their tolerability on anti-hormonal therapy, right? Does a patient who has an app who can then communicate with her team while she's home about how she's feeling, is she more likely to stay on the drug? Is she more likely to get her side effect managed earlier? Is she more likely to do better? And so that was one of the trials that we got. That was one of the studies that we got approved to study that exact question. We've also stratified it based on race and other factors like income. But that trial is on. Actually, it's finished recruiting. We're just waiting and collecting data. So that's one of the things that we've been involved. But technology on a whole can be used. Another thing that I'm involved in. I don't know. You had a port, didn't you, Ricky?
Yep.
Yeah. You still have it?
No.
Oh, yeah. I see your sign. I should. Yeah. I'm working with a company that is putting sensors in a port, such that if you have the port there, why can't it have a sensor that monitors your heart rate, your blood pressure, and those other vital signs that while you're at home, somebody can be saying, oh, this patient heart rate is, it's crazy. We need to check in with you so that we can get you better treatment. And so all those technologies can be utilized. But with all of these, there's also a disparity that comes on because the people who can afford it get that.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome though. But that also frees the patient up to be at home, and I worry though too about how many people are taking chemo by pill, and that I feel like they're not getting the care even I got because I had a port and I had to get my port flushed and I had to, have more attention.
Yeah.
I think it takes some of the subjective work out of it too, because like I do, you ask a patient, how you feeling? Oh, pretty okay. And they have a symptom. How long's that been going on? Oh, a little while. But you can get some really discrete answers when you're able to monitor, more discrete or empiric measurements. And it takes some of that because it's hard to track when you don't feel well. You wake up, you go to sleep, you don't know, it's just, it can be challenging to get that accurate reported data. But when you can couple that with some measurements, and some data that the body doesn't lie, right? The body remembers exactly what's going on. And you can help patients and meet them where they are.
Well, half the time you're in a fog. I mean, you don't feel well, and then you're foggy. I mean, To me, that was one of the most uncomfortable things because I felt out of control. Because I felt
Yeah.
like I was going to make my brain work. Like, wait, where are these drugs going? But you are
How long
causing.
did it take you to get back to what you would consider normal?
I still
After
take chemo brain as a thing. Okay.
It is a thing.
It's been 11 years. I'm still claiming it. But I mean, I think it took a couple of years to
Yeah.
to get your energy back. But I did a lot of chemo. Dr. Gregory, I did TAC, I did mastectomy, TAC 6 rounds, radiation 6 weeks, and then it came back on my chest wall. So then I did like 4 more rounds of carboplatin and gemcitabine. And then I had, implant surgery. So I had a lot of chemo in there. And
Yeah.
so it took me another good year or two just to get my brain, does this brain work? Okay.
I tell patients at least a year from your last treatment, if not
At
longer.
least.
Yep.
Most, I think, a lot longer for a lot of people too, because it is definitely a thing. And I always tell patients, you have to challenge the brain. You have to retrain the brain.
You have to wait a minute.
Mhm.
The thing just weren't firing at the right,
Sitting down in front of a screen watching TV is not going to help. Read, do puzzles, those sort of things. You have to challenge the brain.
I tell my patients, brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand. You ever try to brush your teeth with the opposite hand? Right. It sounds simple, but it's like the hardest thing to do, and you get toothpaste everywhere. It's a mess. I have a question for you on the subject of side effects and chemo brain and everything else. Patients are looking for, desiring, clamoring, doing their own research for holistic ways to manage things like side effects and the symptoms, right? How do we do? I guess the question is report card. How are we doing with meeting patients where they are with that? And in your opinion, how can we do better?
We're not doing very well with it at all.
And for you guys to say that is huge, because if you're saying that, what are the other people saying? I won't say anything about it.
We're not doing very well with the sort of alternative, non-standard options. Part of it in my line of work is that I really like to do evidence-based medicine. I've been trained to do evidence-based, and by that I mean doing medicines that have been appropriately researched. And so I know what is better than the other option. The issue with the non-traditional ways of managing some of those side effects is that there is very little research that goes into it. And so it's hard for me to tell you that this is better than that. And so a lot of us just say, don't do it, because it's not. I, however, grew up in a family of bush doctors. So in the group, my grandmother was a bush doctor. I had a cousin who, and by bush doctors, meaning that their expertise was in using what's around us, the plants and stuff, to try to treat different ailments. Some of them, I think they just chose what was around and utilized it, but some of them actually had some, when I now learn about the science, she had some basis in science. So when I was young, I had an attack of bronchitis, and my grandmother treated me with something what we call boost. It's the really spiky, what you fish, would roast it, grate it up, and draw a tea with it, and then with marijuana tea, and I would get, hey, I'm better today. Don't know if it worked or not, or I would have been here or not. But I tell my patients that too, and I say, it's not that I'm not telling you that because I don't believe in it. I believe that there certainly is some efficacy in some of the non-traditional. I just can't tell you which is better than what, because there really isn't studies for those. And so that's why I say we don't do well, because my hands are tied from that perspective from a lot of those drugs that's on the market. But to add, I get patients who say, I don't want to, a patient, say a patient with a triple negative, young patient, triple negative breast cancer. I used to work in Northern California. I used to get those a lot. Come in and say, I want to go the traditional route instead of, those hurt me because when I see those young patients,
you mean no drugs?
yeah, or go try something else because I'm
Spent
like,
an hour and a half talking to a 37-year-old today. Telling you, hour and a half. Yep.
yeah, and I'm like, you know, because we've studied this, I can tell you this has X% chance of curing you. Why would you let that go to do something else you don't know? But I often say, my compromise is let's do this, and then you can do that after.
Right, do them together. Eat the green stuff, drink the smoothie.
So we can put it together. Yeah, and I often say too, a lot of our drugs come from nature. You know, the Taxol that we use came from the yew tree. The eribulin that we use was extracted from a sea sponge. And so a lot of the drugs that we use actually have their roots in nature. And so it's a matter of just learning what we do. Some people are just opposed to a chemical. It's something that we're going to do. It's probably not good for you. And I try to convince them otherwise. But for a large percentage of patients who refuse standard of care, most of them come back to me with metastatic disease that I can no longer cure. And that hurts my heart a lot.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, I got a call. We had lost smoke for a second. I got a call from this woman, and she said, "Do you know of an oncologist in Boston?" And I said, "Well, what kind of breast cancer do you have? Are you sick? Have you been treated or whatever?" She's like, "Well, I had a biopsy, and I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer 10 years ago, in 2010, 2011." And I said, "Okay, so what'd you do?" "Well, I didn't do anything. I didn't want to take drugs." And I said, "So you let all this time go by?" "Yeah." She said, but now I'm symptomatic and I think I'm getting scared. I think I should see a doctor." I said, "So what are your symptoms?" She's like, "Well, I have more than one tumor, and I have a few of them. And I've lost a lot of weight in the past 2 weeks." And she went on down the line with all the symptoms. And I'm like sitting here like, how can I help her? So I'm like Googling or, texting all my contacts. I need a doctor in Boston, like today. And I said, "You take this phone number, sweetheart, and you call this doctor. I will stay on the phone with you to go to the doctor today." But I said, "Well, why didn't you?" She said, "Why do you feel like you're doing it now?" "Because I want to live. But I didn't think I needed drugs and I was afraid to take them."
Yeah, the sad thing about that case is the average woman with metastatic triple negative breast cancer,
Not gonna make it.
18 months.
And that's what my doctor told me. My doctor told me I had 2 years to live.
Yeah.
In 2011, 2012, and said, "We don't have anything for you." And I said, "Well, no, I can do something different. I can't die right now." But I mean, that's what happened. And I don't know I don't know how to help those people.
Yeah, the thing that I try to make patients understand is we cure most breast cancers, but we cure them when we find them early and we treat them early. The late ones have a much lower cure rate. And so once you have this early, I have a patient that I think about, she actually just passed, who came to me with a small tumor. She actually was pregnant. And I gave a plan, she left, and I hadn't seen her. 2 years later, she shows up in the hospital because she came in because she had lower back pain and she lost feelings and couldn't walk. Turns out she had a baby and then got pregnant again and had another baby. And totally didn't do anything about her breast. And so now I'm seeing her as a metastatic patient where she had a highly curable disease up front. Turns out she was BRCA positive too.
Wow.
And
we know what drugs can work for that. We know some things.
Yeah,
we could have totally changed her trajectory. But unfortunately, that's happened. But it's important to listen to your doctors also. You have to make a decision for yourself ultimately. I tell patients that I am not going to push you. I am never going to kick a patient out of my clinic because they don't want to do what I say. I generally say, okay, you do your stuff, I'll follow you. Come see me once every 3 months, or come see me once every 6 months. Let me just keep an eye on you. Because I think eventually you're going to say, Doc, I'm ready for you. And then maybe I can convince you somewhere along the line to say, let's go that route.
I'll try it.
Yeah.
Oh my
I'll try
God, it's so scary. It's so scary. And we have so many, we just don't talk about it with each other. It's
Yeah.
all, gosh, it's still the
And we let our bodies get depleted to the point where, of course, a toxin like a chemotherapy is going to
Right.
cause really severe side effects, right? Because
Right.
when we were maybe healthy enough to fight and to rebound from the side effects of chemotherapy, we chose not to. And this is what I counsel my patients. You may be in the best fighting shape of your life. If you believe you.
Uh-oh. I think she's having
Yeah.
a bad health today.
I think she's having bad connection, but I think what she's saying is, yeah, I think what she's saying is that oftentimes when you get your diagnosis, that's when you're strongest and best able to fight.
Exactly. Because
And that,
you have this fire in your belly that you can beat this, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing too is that I also tell patients, especially those who are really, really anxious about chemotherapy, that they probably are going to be underwhelmed by the toxicity.
Yeah. Well, now I think it's better. I think it's better than what I took. I took THC together in one infusion. And they don't do that anymore. Because you guys have it easy. It's like the big sister and the little sister, right? But though I got to tell you one thing that I've been using with people about trials is I said, who wants the iPhone 14? Who wants a Tesla? Who wants like the latest and greatest TV set with a 50,000 foot screen? So you're buying science all around you. You're buying science. You're going to go spend what, $1,400 on a stupid phone, right? Or this car that you have to plug in. Like, why wouldn't you buy that science for your body?
Yeah.
If you're putting all the science, you want all the science in your life. You want the remote light switch and the whatever. But why wouldn't you put that in your body? It's the best science you can buy for your body, and you don't have to buy it, but it's the best science you can get. And so that's working a little bit with younger women, I think. But to me, it's like, by any means necessary, do we have to have these conversations, Doc? By any means
Did you just confess that you already have the iPhone 14?
No, I do not. I do not. I only have the 13 by default because the 12 broke. Because I do not, and I do not want a Tesla. So, but if I got my breast cancer came back, I would be the first one to sign up for a trial. So you know what? I've done 4 trials this year, behavioral trials for stress, for chemicals on my body. I do a bunch of trials at Georgetown and Howard. So I'm like on their list, like, call me, I'll do a trial. So I can't, I feel like I have to walk the walk.
Definitely. I mean, I participated in COVID trials. I was like,
yeah, there you go. Gotta walk the walk.
That's my opportunity. Let's do it. We gotta learn. And the other part, we also, when we talk about trials, that we need to focus on is the family members. We need to engage family members in those conversations, because I can tell you the number of times where I have a conversation with a patient, I spend the time and I say, explain it, and then they go home and they come back and they're like, no, I spoke to my brother. I spoke to my sister.
My mother said, girl, what are you doing? Right.
Right.
Yeah, but it really is a family decision. And interestingly, we don't, our families do not talk about health until there is a crisis. And so I've learned over this past 15 weeks that the level of health illiteracy in our Black community is breeding health inequity, because we don't even know what to ask, and it's frightening. But we do have to educate the whole family, because when the crisis happens, then everybody's involved. Well, wait a minute, don't do that. Yes, do this. And so, but if they're not informed in the same way the patient is, it's gonna fail.
That's why one of the advice I give the companies who are now talking about making an impact, I said, we probably have to go down to the community level.
Yeah.
You're coming to be on the tower. We have to go down to the community level and do
Yeah.
some education there.
Right.
Then it may not pay off right now, but in the future it's going to pay
Yeah.
off, because
Yeah.
it's going to make it an easier conversation. Because I do spend more time
Yeah.
getting a Black patient on study than I do a white patient.
Right. Sure.
And a lot of
Sure.
it is the education.
And thank you for doing that. But I think you're right. And so we actually are trying to do two things towards that end. We have an HBCU internship program, and we're bringing on these young women, bright, brilliant, brainiac, they're all pre-med, pre-health, pre-nursing. They work for 10 weeks for us. We pay them to do social media with us. We ask them to do a video with their mom and their best friend at the beginning of the term. And it's we've now had 27 at every circumstance. It's the first conversation they've had with their mom. But by the end, they're really proud of themselves. They've convinced their friends to do self-exams. And I think that we're starting these conversations, and they're going to be this conduit into our Black households, explaining stuff to their family. Mom, what's her story? And what, grandma, did you get a mammogram? And so we're hoping to do that. And then we're also doing, we just brought on a Young Women's Advisory Council for women who have no connection to breast cancer. Never heard of it, never thought about it, whatever. So how do we talk to you? How do we talk to your audience and educate you about health and educate you about screening? And so they're helping us develop these, recruiting materials to say, here's how you talk to young women who have never thought about cancer in their lives. So we have to educate at this level, and also bring the families in. It's got to be a family doctor appointment, or you can FaceTime now. Not everybody has to come, but get your mom on the phone with you while you're while you're in the doctor's office. Right?
So many times for those patients, I usually say, whoever that family member was, can you bring them in, or can I talk to them?
Yeah.
Because I recognize that person is an integral decision maker, where you are concerned, and I need to not only educate you, but educate that person also.
Right.
But that's where I think going to the young girls,
the young women,
absolutely important. They start this conversation, and now everybody has to be involved, because they're like, Mama, what did you do? Tell my aunt, what did you do? What our history? And another thing the culture does is hide your illness.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it.
My mom didn't remember till I was well in chemo that her aunt died of breast cancer at age 44. But she had to rack her brain. Like I had to rack her brain. Like, Mommy, did anyone in our family have it? But they didn't talk about it. Yeah. She had to recall it from, they didn't talk about it. So we got to have these conversations. But oh my gosh, we got to go. Thank you so much for doing this. Will you come back? Will you come back? I don't have to know.
Let me know. Let me know. Whatever you're doing, I can get involved in. Let me know.
I know, and I'm going to call you about the trial stuff that we're working on, because I'm probably going out there next week. But we can't have enough of these conversations, and
definitely.
I don't know, and so we keep screaming and yelling and shouting and going all over the place. We're going to do 10 more events. Are you going to be at SABCS?
I will be.
So come on Monday. We're going to do a When We Trial event on Monday night, the 5th, 6:30.
I will check my schedule. Does it start on Monday, or does it start on Tuesday?
It starts on Tuesday. So come on Monday, and we're going to do a When We Trial event at a church that's downtown San Antonio, and bring in some breaks. And really, what we really want to do is have a community event that doctors and pharmaceutical people can witness.
Okay.
So come to our party and see how we talk about it, and help us talk about it. But I'll send you the flyer.
Send me the flyer. I'll see if I can, because I think I am booked to come in on Tuesday.
Change your flight. It'll be worth it.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're going to put you to work now. You're in our family. We're not going to let you go. We're going to do more stuff and save more lives. And my dog even wants to meet you. This is Harper. But thank you. I don't know what happened to Mo.
I know. Say hi to Mo for me. Say bye to Mo for me.
I will.
And what I told her earlier.
I got you.
I'm very serious about it.
I'm gonna hook you up. I got you.
All right. Cool.
All right,
Thank
all
you.
right. We hope you, I have to say Moseline, we have you were relatable, reliable, and this information was good for you. And we thank our sponsors. We thank everyone that helps us. We thank all of our breasties and breasty love. Thank you so much.
Ooh.
And how can people reach you, Dr. Vidal?
At the West Clinic, Gregory Vidal, if you search that, you can always find me. My email, gvidal@westclinic.com.
gvidal@westclinic.com. I'm gonna put that in the chat. Thank you.
Vidal like Vidal Sassoon, although I don't use their product.
Bless you, bless you. Thank you so much. Breasty
Thank
love.
you.
See you next week,
All right.
everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye.